welcome to Gardening at 58 North. So in this video I'm going to be germinating some more bananas from seed. So I did this last year with quite good success, and because they grew so well last year, I'm going to try it again this year. I'm going to try a few different varieties. So last year I tried 3 different varieties, they're all very different species. Basically I had Enseti ventricosum, which has got very large seeds. It's not a fully hardy banana, but you can grow in cool climates and then you just need to overwinter it indoors. That grew really well for me from seed. I also had Musa sicumensis, which grew really well from seed. That was a hardy banana, which should be able to survive frost at the root level. The top half and stem will die off, but the roots will survive. And the Musa sicumensis has done really well this summer. I'll show you some photos now. It's supposed to be not as hardy as the Musa bazoo banana, but I find in the cold weather conditions, just above freezing, the Musa bazoo tends to go a bit dull with the leaves and it starts getting leaf damage with the low temperatures. But the Musa sicumensis doesn't seem to have that. It keeps growing in the really low temperatures and the leaves continue to look quite nice and green and healthy. So although they might not be able to survive the frost as well as the Musa bazoo, they seem to be more tolerant to cold shock or cold stress from low temperatures, just not freezing temperatures. So that one's done really well. And then the other one I tried last year was Musa unionensis. I didn't have any germination with those seeds at all. In fact, I've still got the seeds in the compost just in case they're going to germinate, but it's been about 10 months now and there's nothing, so I'll probably throw those seeds away soon and just write that off as not working. So this year I'm basically mostly growing sicumensis based plants. So as I say, Musa sicumensis did best for me. What I want to do is grow as many different varieties as I can of hardy banana, see which one grows best in my climate, and then probably just stick with 1 or 2 varieties that grow the best in my cool climate in North Scotland, but also can survive the frost and winter as well. So the more varieties I try, the more likely I'll find one that's perfectly suited for my climate up here. So one of the tricky things with bananas is they're actually quite hard to germinate, so that's another reason I want to try quite a few different ones, because unless the seeds are quite fresh and you give them the exact right germination technique, they can take a little while. So with the ones last year, I started them in January, but I didn't get germination until March. It is quite a long wait until banana seeds start to show any sign of germination or growth, so it's normally at least a month, sometimes 2 or 3 months until you can actually get them to germinate. So this year I'm starting them in November. That should give me a head start. They'll hopefully be germinated by January. That way I can get them to a larger plant before they go out in the garden. They'll get a decent growing season and I'll just get a slightly bigger plant by the end of the year than I would have last year. Although I was still happy with the results last year, even with them germinating as late as March. I still managed to get plants about 1 meter in height. So these are the ones I'm growing this year. As I say, 3 of them are basically Musa sicumensis hybrids or variants of Musa sicumensis. So this one, for example, is Musa sicumensis crossed with paradisia. I'm not quite sure how you say it, it's quite an unusual spelling. But that one I think is supposed to be edible. A couple of these are supposed to be edible as well, whereas normal Musa sicumensis isn't a particularly edible banana. I'm not expecting to get any edible fruit from any of my plants, to be honest, because the climate is too cold up here. And even when they do produce bananas, they're going to be full of seeds and so not particularly palatable. But I'm just growing them for the tropical foliage and just the novelty of growing bananas outdoors in Scotland. So the other one I'm growing is a bit more well known, is the Helen's hybrid Musa, which is again supposed to be some kind of cross with the Musa sicumensis. The idea with these Musa sicumensis crosses is they get the hardiness from the Musa sicumensis parent, and then the other banana that they've been hybridized with will either give bigger leaves or maybe edible bananas, just a bit of variation in the Musa sicumensis genes, so they should be a little bit better growing. Also being a hybrid, they should have some hybrid vigor and they should grow a little bit faster as well. And the ones that they crossed with are also cool climate bananas, but not quite as hardy, so it's a bit of a chance with these whether they'll be hardy or not. There could well be a lot of variation in the genetics, so I'll see which ones are hardy and which ones aren't. And then another one, which is, it's been debated what species this is. This seed company seems to think it's Musa hookerii banana. This is the Daz Giant. It's quite a well-known one. It's quite similar to Musa sicumensis again, with nice dark leaves and hardy at the root system, but it's supposed to grow a lot bigger leaves, a lot taller plants, so be interesting how that one does. And then this one here is probably not going to be hardy in my garden, but I'd like to try it anyway to see how it does. And this is a Musa balbisiana, and this is also known as you can see there, the black Japanese fibre banana, and the Atia back is the other name of the variety. This one is quite different to the sicumensis, very different kind of banana. It grows much taller, slender stems. The plant overall should grow a lot faster, although in my climate that might not be the case if it can't handle such cold temperatures. But it should grow much faster in a moderate climate, and it will have really nice black stems, whereas the other ones will have green stems or green trunks. This will have a black stem as it grows up if it gets high light levels. But as I say, it's not quite as hardy. It can survive temperatures down to 0. But in winter when it gets cold, the C. cumensis, if it's mulched, will survive no problem. Quite hard frost if the roots are protected. The black banana though is less likely to survive, and so it's touch and go whether it will. But I just like to grow it anyway. If it does well over the summer, it'll be nice foliage interest. And if it survives the winter, that's just an added bonus. So what I've done with these so far is to get them ready for planting is I've been soaking them for 48 hours in water. You need to get the moisture back into the seeds. The seeds have dried out. They need to get saturated with water again. Now you can just put them straight into damp compost, but this just gives it a little bit of a head start. It just absorbs the water a bit faster, so it should do a little bit better. And I'll show you now the difference in the seeds. Now all the C. cumensis hybrids pretty much look like this here. The very small seeds you can see there. If there's any floating, they probably won't germinate, but I will be putting these in the soil as well, just in case they do germinate. But all likelihood, anything that's floating probably won't be a viable seed. And all the C. cumensis are similar. The ones I grew last year are about the same size as well. Very small seed. But the black banana here, as you can see, is quite a different one. The seeds are much bigger, and they're also a bit lumpier as well. They have these kind of like lumps all over the seeds, so be interesting to see how they do. And I know from experience, last year I had seeds from a decent supplier. They all germinated, well at least it was about 80% germination, so I was quite happy with the germination rate of the C. cumensis. So I'm hoping for similar with these, but it really does depend how fresh the banana seeds are. If these seeds are over a year old, they might not germinate. If they're quite fresh seeds, they'll germinate quicker and they'll have better success rate. So it'll be interesting to see how they do. So I'm going to put them into compost now. Before I put them into compost, I'll just mention about how hard they are to germinate. You can see here there are instructions on the packet. Basically one of the difficulties with bananas is getting them started with germination. Most seeds, you just give them a warm, moist environment and they'll get growing, whereas banana seeds, they really need massive fluctuations in temperatures, and they also need extra high temperatures. The reason is most of these bananas grow in sort of a rainforest environment where there's a lot of trees, high rainfall levels, but they don't want to start germinating until there's a clearing in the forest. So they'll fall to the ground, they'll be quite warm and they'll be quite damp, which would normally start most seeds to germinate. But if they germinate straight away, there's not the light levels that they need, so that they won't actually do that well, and they probably won't really be able to survive with the shade from the upper trees. So what happens is they wait dormant in the soil. When there's a clearing in the trees, either a tree dies because it's too old or there's a storm and it falls down, then very intense tropical sun starts shining in onto the soil. And during the day that sun will cause the soil to get really quite warm, up to 30 or 35 degrees in temperature. And then at night, because these are high altitude bananas, the temperature will drop down to about 10 degrees or so. So there's massive swings in temperature. If they still have the tree canopy, the temperatures will probably be only between 10 and 25 degrees. But with the loss of the tree canopy, the temperatures are more like 10 to 35 or 40 degrees. Big temperature swings. So that really encourages them to germinate, and so that's what I need to replicate here. So what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be putting it on my heated propagator, putting the heated propagator on the maximum setting. I'm also going to be putting extra insulation on the propagator because it does struggle to get above 35. So I need to keep it well wrapped because normally only about 25-30 without the extra insulation. And I'll have it on a timer, so at night time it will turn off and it will just be ambient room temperature, which for me is about 18-20 degrees. And then during the day hopefully be 35-40. I'll leave it like that for a month. If that's not working, what I'll do is I'll take it to my conservatory where it gets down to about 10 degrees at night and try the same there. But the tricky thing with the conservatory is because the ambient temperature is 10 degrees, it's hard to get it up to the 35 degrees. It will only get to probably about 25-30, even with the extra insulation. So that's the regime I'm doing. Basically you need very big swings every day in temperature, and I'll need to check the seeds quite regularly as well, because once they start germinating I'll need to put them in a sunny warm position, because if they stay in the propagator where it's insulated without any light, they'll just get very leggy and start to die. So I'll now show you how I plant these up. I'm basically doing a similar method to last year. Last year I did actually start them on a wet paper towel method, which is normally the most successful chance of getting seeds to germinate because it's sterilised. It's got perfect moisture content in and around the seeds, but also there's lots of airflow so nothing starts to rot. But the problem with that method is if you have it for more than 2 or 3 weeks, you start getting mould and you have to replace the tea towel or tissue paper, whatever you use as the absorbent material, every 2 or 3 weeks as it starts to get mouldy. So the problem with that method is with bananas, it takes so long to germinate, 2 or 3 months sometimes. that it's a lot of work constantly refreshing that tea towel or the paper that absorbs the moisture. So that's the reason I'm just doing it straight to compost, which is what I did last year. I started off with the tea towel method, but then I really had to go on to the compost method just because it was too labour intensive. I'll give you an example of how I'm doing them all. I used the black banana as an example because the seeds are much larger and easier to show you. So when it comes to the banana seed, they're a little bit different to the positioning of the seed compared with most. With most seeds, the point where the root grows from is the section that you normally have pointing down. So you can see in this banana, there's sort of like a little circle there, and it comes to a point. That's actually where the new growth comes from. So if I turn it over, you can see there's nothing on that side. The other banana seeds, pretty much all banana seeds will look identical to this, just slight variation in size and shape. But these ones are slightly larger, so it's easier to show. And so what I'm looking for is, on a normal plant you'd have that facing down, so the root comes out and the shoot comes to the side. Bananas are slightly different because the shoot comes up and then all the little roots appear from around the side and grow down. So you actually want this facing upwards so the shoot can come straight up. So it is a little different to most seeds. And all I'm going to do is plant it maybe a centimetre under the surface. So not too deep, but just deep enough that it is definitely covered. So I'll just make a little space like that and then pop it in, making sure that it's that section facing upwards where the growth will come from. And then I'll just go ahead and do that with all of these, place them in the compost. So that's all the seeds sown and put in the compost. I'm now going to label it as well, because these bananas are all going to look really similar, and unless you're an expert in banana species, it's going to be very hard to tell the difference, especially for the ones that are the hybrid Sequamensis plants. They're all going to be incredibly similar, and even then they have a lot of variability in each variety, so they can look quite similar to other varieties at times. So I'm going to make sure they're all well labelled and try not to mix up any of the labels in the whole procedure of germinating them, and then hopefully I'll make sure that I always know what variety I've got. So I'm going to go ahead now, do the same with the rest, put them into the propagator, go through that procedure, and then the real thing now will be a waiting game. I remember last year with my bananas, I was really excited because I'd never grown bananas from seed before, and I was checking them every day, sometimes twice a day, just to see if there's any sign of growth coming out of the seeds. And I was doing that for probably 2 or 3 weeks, maybe a month. Nothing was happening at all, so then I just had to put it into soil and just leave it, because with bananas, as I say, they take such a long time to germinate. There's no point checking them every single day, because you'll probably get disappointed because nothing seems to happen. So I'll probably leave these in here for a week or two, check them every other day, and then hopefully in 2 or 3 months we'll have some nice germination rate. So for each one of these, there's about 10 seeds in each packet. I'm hoping for maybe 5 to germinate from each packet. Even if I get 1 and it makes it to adulthood, the plant, I'll be happy with that. I'd like at least 1 from each variety to grow, but ideally 5, just in case some get killed by disease later on when they're just coming up as young plants. So I'll see you guys hopefully in a few months' time, and we'll see how these have germinated. So it's almost 3 months later, and as you can see, we've had some germination already. So the first one to germinate was actually this one at the back, and this is the Helen's hybrid. This germinated within about 2 weeks, so I was quite surprised at that. When I grew banana seeds last year, most of them took at least a month or 2 before there was any sign of germination, so I was really happy with that. And it was so quick, I was actually wondering if I was going to get multiple ones of these coming, and I was going to get loads of Helen hybrids. But even though one germinated so quickly, it's now almost 3 months later, and there hasn't been any more germinating from that tray. So I've got one of the Helen's hybrid. You can see it's quite a nice sized plant now, because it is about 2 months old, and it's been growing quite well under grow lights. And the next plant that came up was actually this one here, the Daz Giant. For some strange reason, this one has really struggled to grow. It's grown its first leaf there, and it's just been really slow growing, and it's only just starting to grow its second leaf. So this one then came up a few weeks after that, Daz Giant, and this one is actually overtaken it already. For some reason, this is just a much healthier plant. I don't know if the seed was in better condition or if the genetics are better in this plant, but this one's grown a lot better. It's already got 2 leaves. And then the third variety that I've had grow is the Paradisia one. You can see this is a very young plant. This only popped up probably a week or 2 ago, so that's still very young. It's just got its first leaf. So they're all growing quite well now that they are up. The only one that hasn't germinated is the Altea Black variety of banana, which I think is one of the less hardy of the 4 varieties that I've got. So I'll see if that germinates later in the year. At the moment, I've got my heated propagator. I'm trying to keep it as hot as possible, but my house is quite cold, and even though I've surrounded it in bubble wrap to try and control any loss of heat, it's still not getting as hot as I would like it. So what I'm expecting is later in the year when the sun comes round to my conservatory and I can get high temperatures in the conservatory, put my propagator in there, and then I'll probably get a second batch of germination. Hopefully the Altea Black will germinate in that round. So that's about all for this video. As you can see, they're starting to come on quite nicely now. And these are 3 varieties that I haven't previously grown, so it'll be interesting to see how these do in my climate. I'm going to be giving you guys an update in a few months' time once it's grown a bit more. So hopefully by then my outdoor plants might be showing signs of growth as well. Just depend on the spring and how the weather goes. But by then these should have grown a lot more, especially this one here, as it's well established already. The growth tends to be exponential with banana plants. You can see here when the first leaf comes up, it's very small. The next one isn't a huge amount bigger, but then from then onwards it's exponential, because the more leaves it has, the more space it has for photosynthesis. The more it can photosynthesize, the faster it can grow. So they are a little bit slow to get going, but once they get going, they take off and they grow incredibly fast. So that's all for this video update, and I'll see you guys in a few months when hopefully I've got a few more of these germinated and my other ones are coming back out of dormancy.